In this morning, good morning to all of you, to you here in Helsinki and to you following this event through the live stream all over the world. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to open this special event. The synthesis report published today is the most extensive evidence-based review of the impacts the arts and culture can have on our health. The report finally confirms that the arts and culture are linked to well-being, health and social inclusion. This shows how cultural capital can really be the key to experiencing the meaningfulness and significance of life. This report also shows how the arts and culture can prevent illnesses and social problems. In addition, we know now that it makes sense to use art to support rehabilitation. The Health Evidence Network Synthesis report has examined over 900 evidence-based studies on the effects of the arts on health and well-being. According to the report, art has beneficial impacts on health promotion, the prevention of mental and physical illnesses, the treatment of acute and chronic illnesses also. Art can also help curb the rise in healthcare costs. The research data on the economic impact relates, among other things, to the direct and indirect employment effects of the arts and culture, as well as to the effects that increase economic attractiveness and vitality. However, I would like to see more research on the economic impact of the use of art in the healthcare and social welfare sector, particularly as part of preventive action. In the world where money talks, this is a very important theme. And let me share with you some experiences from Finland. In our thinking, the arts and culture have become an important part of the promotion of well-being and health through long-term cross-sectoral cooperation that has lasted for several government terms. Our focus is on the realization of people's cultural rights, on the benefit of the arts for society and new opportunities for artists. One of the key projects of the previous government program was to expand, in cooperation with healthcare and social welfare, the principle of investing up to 1% of the construction costs of public buildings in the acquisition of artwork. The aim of this scheme was to establish the arts as part of normal activities of the healthcare and social welfare sector. Normal, nothing extra or luxury. 1 year ago, ministers from Ministry of Social Affairs and Health and the Ministry of Education and Culture jointly issued recommendations to municipalities and regions on the use of arts in the healthcare and social welfare sector. And these recommendations were an important step in making use of artistic activities in the comprehensive care of people. Regions and municipalities are encouraged to draw up objectives for promoting the effects of the arts and culture on well-being. They are also encouraged to appoint a public official who is responsible for cultural well-being. In addition, a dedicated sum for the arts and culture should be systemically included in the budget for healthcare and social welfare. In addition, the new Act on Municipal Provision of Cultural Activities lays down regulations on the municipality's duty to promote the arts and culture as part of residents' health and well-being, inclusion and community engagement, and local and regional vitality. Dear friends of cultural capital and well-being, based on the evidence of the research outcomes published today, I would strongly encourage all decision makers to include artistic activities in the work they do to promote health and well-being. Without taking art and culture seriously and making them integrated part in services and physical surroundings, it's not possible to achieve our objectives in social and health sectors. To sum it up, we need more cultural capital for our well-being, both at individual as well as community and national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Kosonen. Next, we will have a pre-recorded message by Piriska Östling, who is Regional Director for Europe ad interim. So please, the technique.
Honourable Ministers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry not to be able to participate in person, but I take great pleasure in recording this message on the launch of the WHO's first ever report on the evidence base for arts and health interventions. Long before humans knew about penicillin or genetics, they created music and art. Our need to express our hopes and fears, to create meaning from our surroundings, and to share this through artistic creations with others is as profound as our need to quench our thirst or still our hunger. Should we be surprised that art can improve health? Should we be surprised that art can give us well-being? The famous French painter and sculptor Georges Braque once summarized the relationship between the arts and health in a way that only an artist can. Art, he said, is a wound turned into light. The report we are launching today is a substantial piece of academic work. It brings together hundreds of publications that illustrate the positive effects that arts interventions can have on a range of health challenges across the life course and through the continuum of care. The report shows us how the arts can tackle wicked or complex health challenges such as diabetes, obesity, and mental ill health, offering solutions that common medical practice has so far been unable to address effectively. I'm particularly pleased that several of the countries in the Nordic region are taking such an active leadership role by demonstrating the practical ways in which cross-sectoral collaboration between culture and health can achieve meaningful results. Sweden has pioneered a culture on prescription scheme in some of its counties, such as Skåne. Denmark is piloting a program of culture vitamins for people with stress, anxiety, or depression in several of its municipalities. Finland has instituted a national action program on the arts and culture for health and well-being, and Norway has enacted a public health law and a cultural law that emphasizes the importance of arts in health promotion and care. Collectively, these member states are showing how effective arts and health policies can be designed and implemented. Arts and health is not a new area of research. I'm hopeful that this report will help to move the discussion more firmly into the policy arena and encourage ministries of health to examine some of the policy considerations that the report outlines, such as ensuring the availability and accessibility of arts for health programs within communities, supporting arts and culture organizations in making health and well-being part of their work, and introducing or strengthening referral mechanisms from health or social care facilities to arts programs and activities. Of course, our job is not done, and many exciting challenges remain. Further research is needed to understand the health effects of particular arts interventions. More funding is needed to roll out and evaluate arts interventions at scale and across countries. And a better understanding of the health economics of arts interventions are still needed if we are to mainstream arts and health. Nevertheless, I'm confident that this report will allow us to change into a higher gear to accelerate research and policy development in this area and to see arts and health interventions for what they are, creative solutions to complex challenges. Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a successful launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Piroska Östling. Next, we will have Research Officer Niels Fitje from also the World Health Organization's Regional Office for Europe. You give an introduction on the role of the arts in improving health and well-being.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and thank you for your kind introduction. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the next session, in which Daisy, I'll ask you to come up in a second. We'll give you the kind of meat and bones of what we're here to discuss and learn about. I.e., she'll give you an overview of arts and health and an overview of the report. But before she does so, I wanted to give you a quick kind of background about why this stuff is even happening within WHO. So I'm assuming you know why you're here, but you probably have no idea why I'm here. In fact, you probably have no idea who I am. So I'm just going to say a little bit about that first, as a matter of introduction. So I'm part of a small but very dedicated team of individuals who work on a project called Cultural Context of Health and Well-being at the WHO Regional Office for Europe. And it's a small team, it's a small program, but I think it serves a vital part within WHO. It tries to articulate the case for why culture matters in public health and in public health policy making. Right down through the life course, doesn't matter how old you are, right down through the continuum of care. It doesn't matter if you're self-medicating in bed because you've got a cold or you're on the surgery receiving a major operation. In all of those parts of life, culture matters. We do a whole bunch of things around the kind of theoretical and conceptual part of culture and health. We think through how culture matters in terms of eating, nutrition and nutritional health. We think through why culture matters in terms of antibiotic resistance, why it matters, why you might want to take antibiotics or why you might not want to take antibiotics. But we also try to think through why culture matters on a practical level. And I think that's exactly where this report is situated. We're a space within WHO that seeks to systematically understand how cultural contexts affect health and well-being. So this report in particular is, I think, interesting in several ways. Arts and health as a field has been around for, well, I mean, as the regional director was saying, arts has been around ever since human kind of existence. But arts and health as a research area has been around probably for 30 or 40 years. And in that time, it's slowly grown and it's slowly gained momentum. There are some countries in the Nordics, but also the UK, where arts and health, I think, is received firmer and firmer footing. But there are still these questions that abound around the efficacy, the evidence base, whether or not arts can actually impact and affect health. So this report was commissioned to try and examine that question around the evidence base and hopefully put to rest some of those questions. So I think the report achieves three main things. It provides a starting point. It's a kind of map, a map of evidence. There are almost 1,000 references contained in the report. Anybody who is interested in arts and health from a research perspective is going to use this report as a starting point to further research the area. It will serve as a place for practical examples. There are several case studies in the report that I hope you will gravitate towards, and that I hope people in this room and outside watching on the live stream will look at in order to get inspiration about how arts and health actually works on the ground, how it works practically. But most importantly, I think, and I hope, that this report will serve as the first word to move the conversation on from the question about evidence and into the realm of policy making, so that we no longer ask in general, do arts and health, can the arts have a positive effect on health? I think we know that they can, but that we look at the specifics. We look at specific arts interventions. We look at specific policies. We try to understand how we can best operationalize arts in health. So moving it from the pure evidence question into the realm of policy making. And I think that's part of the purpose of this launch, is to have a sit down at the round table and discuss that question, see what we can do to perhaps accelerate that. So that's enough from me. I do want to take a moment to introduce Daisy. Daisy is, I think, she's kind of a true interdisciplinarian. She's a kind of unicorn within this field. She has a deep background in music and the arts, but she is also she also has a PhD in psychoneuroimmunology, which itself is an insanely interdisciplinary kind of topic. She's an epidemiologist, and she has also worked several years on the ground in the NHS, managing arts and clinical intervention programs. Most importantly, though, she's been a wonderful colleague to work with. So, Daisy, I'd like to welcome you onto the stage to say a little bit about arts and health and the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Niels. And it's a real pleasure to be speaking to you today to launch this report. As Niels mentioned, the focus of this report was to bring together the evidence base on scientific studies that have looked at how the arts can affect our health. And we defined arts for this report as creative leisure time activities, including participating in performing arts activities like singing and dancing, or visual arts, design and craft activities, or otherwise engaging with literature activities, including reading fiction and being engaged in book clubs and libraries, engaging with online, digital or electronic arts, including things like photography or creating animations and films, broader cultural engagement like going to museums, concerts, the theatre and exhibitions, and other types of creativity such as gardening-based activities. And the position we took when we were writing this report was to consider all of these activities as multimodal, in that these activities combine multiple different factors, including aesthetics, imagination, evoking emotions, providing opportunities for social interaction and cognitive stimulation, and also opportunities for physical activity and engagement with health settings or themes of health. And all of these different components can then be linked via psychological, physiological, social and behavioural mechanisms with both the prevention and also the management and treatment of illness. So we specifically carried out this work as a scoping review, so trying to understand the breadth of studies that have been carried out and also get a sense of the depth, how much these studies have looked at the particular aspects of different health outcomes. But we didn't focus on any particular methodological approach. Rather, we wanted to take a very broad approach to evidence, considering both randomized control trials and other quantitative approaches like laboratory studies and analyses of cohort or population level data, but also looking at qualitative data, including ethnographies, case studies, qualitative interview studies, and broader studies of process evaluations and implementation. So in total, we found over 200 systematic reviews and meta-analyses that between them cover over 3,000 studies that have been carried out on this topic. And we also found a further 700 individual studies that we felt were key to include in this review. So in total, we're looking at over 3,500 studies that have been referenced in total throughout this report. So this does, as Niels mentioned, make this the largest evidence review that's been carried out on this field to date. We used a thematic coding approach in order to identify the different themes that were coming out from all of these studies. And we clustered these into two broad sections in the report: prevention and promotion of illness, and also the management and treatment of health conditions. And I'm going to give an overview of some of the findings from this. And I'm going to start by speaking about management and treatment, because that's the evidence base that I think most people are most familiar with from the last few years. So the evidence suggests that the arts can support women across the perinatal periods, and particularly helping their mental health. This is something that we see during pregnancy, during the birth itself in terms of reductions of pain and anxiety, and also post-birth, including supporting women if they have conditions like postnatal depression. We also found that for adults and children with mild or moderate mental illness, engaging in the arts can help to reduce the symptoms of these conditions, including both at a psychological and also at a biological level. For individuals who have more serious mental illnesses, we found that the arts can provide supplementary support to pharmacological or psychological treatments. For example, if we consider psychosis, there's evidence to suggest that music can help to reduce symptoms of psychopathology, psychoticism, and also paranoid ideation. The arts also have a really key role to play in the delivery of acute care, both in terms of patient experience and also clinical outcomes. If we consider premature infants, there's a very broad literature suggesting that the arts can support both in reducing the distress of these infants in neonatal intensive care units and also helping to reduce other negative events. Indeed, there's evidence to suggest that things like music can actually help premature babies to feed better, gain weight faster, and leave hospital sooner, which of course has economic considerations as well. Within rehabilitation, the arts can support in terms of improving motor function and motor skills, as well as reducing fatigue, helping people to carry on for longer and more effectively with their treatments. And in situations like surgery and intensive care, there's a very wide literature suggesting that the arts can help to reduce psychological symptoms of anxiety and stress, and alongside this, reduce the need for the same levels of medication or sedative. And again, we can start to consider the health economic implications of this, if the arts, in particular things like music, are helping to reduce that need for medication. For individuals who have neurological or neurodevelopmental disorders, there's a literature suggesting that the arts can provide wide-ranging support. For people who have different autistic spectrum disorders, things like music can help with aspects of social communication and behavioural learning. For individuals who've developed dementia, the arts can have benefits even into the late stages of the disease through helping factors such as memory, as well as having behavioural benefits such as reducing agitation, and social benefits such as reducing isolation and loneliness. For individuals who've got brain injuries, such as having had a stroke, engagement with the arts, such as music, can help in the development of new neural pathways. And for adults who have degenerative brain injuries, the arts, particularly things like dance, can help with motor function. And this has been shown in things such as balance and gait in people who have conditions including Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis. The arts also have benefits for non-communicable diseases. And this includes both the management of symptoms and also the psychological adaptations to these conditions. So if we consider cancer, for example, there's a wide literature that engaging in arts activities can help things like coping and optimism, as well as helping to reduce some of the side effects of treatments, such as pain or nausea. For people who have lung diseases, engaging with arts activities that encourage breathing can help to reduce symptoms of breathlessness and can also help to provide motivation to do breathing exercises in order to maintain lung function. And for people who've got cardiovascular diseases, engaging in some activities like dance can function as an engaging form of exercise, helping to reduce body fat, as well as things like music and other arts helping to reduce symptoms of stress. And this includes stress at a psychological level, which is linked in with cardiovascular disease progression, but also stress at a biological level, including things such as blood glucose levels, blood pressure, and even gene expression linked with stress. And finally, in end-of-life care, the arts can again have this dual role, including helping with the management of symptoms such as breathlessness and pain, as well as helping with psychological and psychosocial factors, such as communication amongst patients, carers, and relatives, and in cases of bereavement, helping to support relatives and loved ones in grief, coping, and with social support. But in this report, we also specifically looked at aspects of prevention and promotion in actually trying to work out whether engagement with the arts, particularly in wider community settings, could be having health benefits. In other words, might be a way of supporting good health and helping to reduce the load on health services. In particular, we looked at things like social determinants of health, looking at how the arts can help to improve social bonding and in particular increase social capital, which we know is very much linked in with risk factors for disease development. We also looked at social inequalities, and actually we found that the arts seem to have disproportionately more benefits for individuals who are more at risk. The arts are not just a cherry on top of a cake, they actually seem to be most important for people who are experiencing hardships. So we looked particularly at children who are at risk or exposed to poverty or violence, and found that the arts are able to support in terms of reducing the risk of these children developing behavioural problems, withdrawal, or mental illness. The arts also have a critical role to play in child development. The arts support mother-infant bonding, and there's evidence from an evolutionary perspective suggesting this is one of the reasons that we actually have arts within our societies. And mother-infant bonding supports maternal nurturing behaviours and also supports the positive emotional and behavioural development of children. The arts also support speech and language, including auditory skills development and language skills. And we see this both in children who are neurotypical and also children who've got developmental delay. And the arts have a really important role to play within education. Engaging with the arts in childhood is actually associated with structural differences in grey matter in the brain. And there's a strong literature suggesting that arts is linked in with academic performance and academic attainment. Now, there is a debate as to whether this is due to transfer effects. In other words, whether the benefits that we learn from the arts can transfer across cognitively to other domains. But there is a strong literature suggesting that having the arts in schools helps to reduce behavioural problems and bullying and improve concentration, thereby supporting children's learning. The arts also support in health-promoting behaviours. People who engage in the arts are actually more likely to eat healthily and to exercise more. And they're also more likely to be aware of the negative effects of risk behaviours, such as taking drugs. And this links in very much with issues around health communication. The arts can transcend language barriers. So they're a very powerful way of transmitting critical health messages. And this is vital here when we're considering this question of how important are the arts when we think about health. There is a danger that we think the arts are only something that's worth adding on when we've got a fully functioning health system already. But in fact, it's the opposite. There's very strong evidence to suggest that the arts can play a critical role in health emergencies such as epidemics by helping to address these issues of health communication. So in other words, it's often in the most trying and serious of events that we really need the arts the most. The arts are particularly a good way of reaching marginalised groups and people who wouldn't otherwise engage with healthcare as well, by helping to break down barriers such as stigma, helping to normalise people's engagement with health settings. The arts also play an important role in caregiving. Arts and humanities for centuries have improved our understanding of illness and disease, but they can also support specific clinical skills. This includes the visual diagnostic skills of doctors and communication skills between patients and healthcare professionals. And the arts also support the well-being of carers and both formal and informal staff. This can include reducing burnout, which we know is a major issue facing health services globally at the moment, and also improving things like identity and self-efficacy amongst people delivering care. And the arts can also help in preventing the development of illness. There's very strong literature that the arts can enhance multidimensional subjective well-being. But there's also literature suggesting that the arts, engagement with the arts across the lifespan, reduces the risk of developing mental illness. For example, arts engagement is associated with lower levels of daily stress, and engagement with arts at different points in the life can reduce the risk of developing depression, psychological adjustment issues, and improve things like confidence and self-esteem. Specifically, in cases of trauma, the arts can also help in terms of reducing anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. And we see this amongst asylum seekers and refugees, including in refugee camps. And we also see it in intensive care settings, such as hospitals, where engagement with the arts in intensive care can help to reduce the risk of developing post-traumatic stress after patients leave. And when we look at ageing, we see similar patterns. People who engage in the arts more can help to build their cognitive reserve, the resilience of their brain against degeneration from conditions such as dementia. And we also see that engagement with more physical arts activities like dance can help to improve balance, posture, and walking speed, including reducing the risk of fear of falling. What's more, there's also growing evidence suggesting that engagement with the arts across the lifespan can help to reduce the risk of dying prematurely. Now, about half of this effect seems to be because of things like socioeconomic status, previous health conditions, education, but the rest of this association remains independent of these factors. And when we consider all the things I've already mentioned across this presentation, we can get a sense for how they could add up and accumulate over an individual's life, meaning that they have a higher chance of living a healthy life for longer. So this report synthesises this evidence base and points to many more facts than I've been able to explain in this presentation. But the report also has two other purposes that Niels mentioned. First of all, we wanted to highlight some of the excellent case studies of practice happening within the WHO European region. And I thought I'd share a brief snippet of 3 of these with you this morning. The first one is an example from here in Finland, and it's the Observatory for Arts and Cultural Education. Now, this observatory is a really good example of how we can try and support arts engagement within society. This was set up in 2017 as part of a government programme to try and improve access to arts and culture. And it particularly focused on children and young people, looking at how we could enable children to engage more with the arts and culture alongside their education. Now, the aims of this included improving the health, well-being and wider development of children. And the observatory brings together evidence along with resources and examples of good practice to try and support activities that are happening in local settings. And I wanted to highlight this because it's an example of how a government-led initiative can try and support this access and ensure that children and young people can engage with the arts and thereby experience the benefits that we've been discussing today. The second example I thought I'd flag was from the UK, and this is social prescribing. The UK has been engaging in social prescribing for a number of years, but it's had a particular emphasis over the last few years. And this year we had a large investment to try and make sure this is expanded nationally. So the plan is that people who attend either health professionals or social care professionals or people living in the community can be referred to a link worker or a navigator, somebody who can put them in touch with activities that they could take part in, including arts and culture. The plan is that by 2023, nearly a million people will have gone through this scheme in the UK. And the economic analyses so far have suggested that for every pound that goes into the scheme, around £2.30 is saved in terms of reductions in unnecessary visits to healthcare professionals and also reductions in terms of medication prescriptions. And particularly, this scheme can therefore support the health service and help to reduce the load on healthcare professionals, but it can also provide person-centred care for people who really need it. And the third example I wanted to flag is Dance for Parkinson's. There are over 300 communities globally who are offering dance activities for people with Parkinson's disease. These are typically led by professional dancers and dance teachers who work in partnership with doctors and other healthcare professionals. The aim of these classes is to improve physical symptoms, including balance and walking, and also cognition, but also to provide psychosocial benefits, including providing social support networks and improving confidence and mental health. Dance for Parkinson as an organisation acts as a bit like an umbrella, bringing together resources, including research studies. They currently host over 40, the reports for over 40 clinical trials on this topic, alongside other resources that will help people to establish and lead these groups. And finally, the third thing that this report does is, in order to take this step forwards, now that we know that there is a large evidence base, the report suggests a number of policy options that we could be considering in order to enable access and engagement with the arts, in order to support their links with health, and also to improve the evidence base as we move forwards. And these policy options are clustered under three headings. The first of these is around acknowledging the growing evidence base. We're no longer in a position where we can ask, where is the evidence? That's exactly what this report does. But we particularly suggest that different countries now try and support the implementation of arts activities, particularly those for which there is a strong evidence base. And we've given examples of some of these within the report. We also think there should be the sharing of good practice and particularly of effective interventions between other countries. It was highlighted when we were doing this report that there are different pockets of excellence in different countries, but they're not always being well linked up. So we recommend that there are ways for countries to share their learning between each other. And we also know that there needs to be more research. Although there is a very large evidence base now and it's growing rapidly, we particularly think there needs to be more research on certain areas, those that are policy relevant. So this includes more studies that look at population level data, more studies that focus on implementation and process evaluations of actually taking programmes and making sure they get embedded within health systems or within communities. And also more evidence that looks at things such as biological mechanisms so that we have an even better understanding as to how these interventions work. We also think there needs to be wider recognition of the added health value that the arts bring. So, for example, we need to ensure there is free and affordable provision of culturally diverse arts activities in different communities globally. And this includes particularly focusing on children and young people and marginalised groups, those who wouldn't normally engage in the arts. We also want to encourage all arts and cultural organisations to make health and well-being an integral part of their strategies. This doesn't necessarily need to change the activities they're leading, but does need them to recognise the benefits these activities can have and to try and work in a way that would enable these benefits amongst participants. And we also want to actively promote public awareness of the benefits of the arts. Most people are very aware of the benefits of exercise, good nutrition, but we want the benefits of the arts to be equally well recognised so that people engage not just for their own pleasure, that of course is important, but also engage at times when they might need it most, such as when they're experiencing poor mental health. And we also want to note the cross-sectoral nature of arts and health, so particularly by creating structures for cross-sectoral collaboration, so it's easier to work between health bodies and arts and cultural bodies. We want to help develop stronger lines of referral from health and social care to community arts. Social prescribing is one example, but there are many other ways that we could be trying to improve these links and these referral processes. And we also think the arts and humanities should be included in the training of healthcare professionals, both for the well-being and skills development of these health professionals themselves, but also so that they are aware of the evidence base, so that the health professionals of the future know the importance of arts and culture and the importance of being able to reference and refer their patients through to these activities. So I just wanted to end by considering the question, why should we be focusing on the arts right now? And there are several reasons for this. First, the arts can provide solutions for conditions where there are no current healthcare solutions. The arts are multimodal activities. They are very effective ways of engaging people. So where there are conditions where we're not really sure, we don't believe we have an optimal way of treating or managing these conditions, that's the perfect opportunity to be considering how the arts could provide support. It was mentioned at the start of this morning that there is less evidence than we would like on health economics, but the evidence that we do have is promising, that the arts can be cost-effective ways of tackling complex challenges. And we certainly welcome more studies on this going forwards, and the recognition that because the arts can combine these psychological and physical activities, they could be ways of addressing mental and physical health simultaneously. But the arts also help us to address a number of key priorities at the moment. For example, within Health 2020, the arts are one of the ways that we could actually catalyse actions within other sectors, and also ways we could help to build resilient communities. In other words, the arts are ways that we can help to achieve targets that have already been set. If we're considering the WHO General Programme of Work, there are a number of ways that the arts can feed into this, including supporting multi-sectorial action for health, increasing human capital, and accelerating action on non-communicable diseases and mental health. And finally, for the Sustainable Development Goals for health, the arts are a really good way of supporting health and well-being, supporting education and building communities. Finally, I think we can realise that many health services at the moment are facing challenges around resources. And at a time when we're having those discussions, it sounds sensible to be bringing in other sectors, such as the arts and culture, to try and support people's health, both at the prevention level and also at the management and treatment level. So I'd just like to finish by thanking very much all of you for coming, and also to my co-author, Saoirse Finn, for writing this report with me, and specifically WHO and Niels for their fantastic support over the last couple of years in writing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy. We will have the roundtable discussion later at 10:30, so then you will have the possibility to ask questions more on Daisy's report. Now we will have an artistic intervention by Katja Thompson, who's a doctoral researcher and teacher from Sibelius Academy, University of the Arts, Helsinki, Finland. Katja Thompson.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Good. Very nice to see you all. I'm a music education lecturer here at Sibelius Academy, and I've done a lot of work with musicians from the Middle East coming to Finland as refugees. And I have a couple of minutes to do some art with you, literally. So, can I please ask you to put your iPads and phones and any other valuable things that you have in your laps under your seat? I wish I'm not going to throw this away while I... Okay, great. As I work with the musicians without really having a language that we share, yes, we kind of throw ourselves into playing music together, learning music from each other by ear, by the little language that we have, but also we spent quite a lot of time getting to know each other kind of holistically and making sound with body and voice together, which is an important part of going together. So I'm going to do a little bit of that with you now. So can you just please put your hands together and rub them together a little bit. And in a moment, we're going to do a huge clap together. Hope you can see me at the back. Here we go. Hands meeting at the same time. Pretty good, pretty good. Let's start again. Hands meeting right at the same time. Here we go. And fantastic. One more. That was so perfect. And here we go. Lovely. Now put your hands on your knees. We're going to do 8 claps on the knees like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here we go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Count with me as you do it. After that 8, you do a clap on the 9th. 1, 2, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here we go again. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now listen carefully. What follows is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Daga, 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 doom. Let's say that. Daga, 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 doom. Wonderful. And again. Daga, 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 doom. Let's play it. Daga, daga, da. Daga, 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 doom. Cool. And again. Daga, 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 doom. Lovely. When we put it together, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Daga, 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 doom. Wonderful. Are we ready? Let's do it. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Daga, 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 doom. Lovely. Can you repeat after me? Doom, dek, dek, 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 doom, dek, yeah, doom, dek, dek, doom, dek, dek, doom, dek, dek, doom, dek, dek, stop. Wonderful. That's kind of in a feel of malfouf from the Middle East. Let's put this Tanzanian rhythm break that we played first together with the malfouf, okay? So dum 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 da 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 dum dek dek dum dek dek dum dek dek, yeah? If you feel like it, bring your body with it as you like. Dum is the low one and tek is the high one. Starting from the Tanzanian break, here we go. 1, 2, here we go. Dum 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 da 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 dum dek dek 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Daga 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 da. That is all from me. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the seminar.
Thank you so much. That gave energy and was a bit difficult for me.
You did very well, very well.
Thank you. I'm proud of myself. The next we will have a discussion on the relevance of the World Health Organization Arts and Health Report and the key policy considerations within the Finnish context. So I will invite Director Taru Koivisto and Director General Riitta Kaivosoja to join me here around the table. Taru Koivisto is from Department for Wellbeing and Services of Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, Finland. And Riitta Kaivosoja is from Department for Art and Cultural Policy, Ministry of Education and Culture, Finland. So welcome. Well, after hearing and reading more about the WHO Arts and Health Report, what do you consider is the relevance of the report and the key policy considerations in the Finnish context? Would you please, Riitta, start?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the writers, the authors, Daisy Fancourt and Savor Finn for the fine report. And I think it's most valuable to get that kind of report where there are so many aspects. And I think much to think for all the actors as well, from the administration to local actors actually. And what is the importance of the report for Finland, and especially I think the Ministry of Education and Culture, is that now we get the whole picture of what has happened and what is the relevance, and also what are the results of many research, and that's most valuable, because we have worked in Finland quite a long time nationally, but now we get in a way in international context to the phenomenon, so I feel it most important.
And there were also wonderful examples from Finland, so we can be proud of ourselves. Taru.
Yes, I also want to thank WHO and our writers of a report, because now we have evidence on this area, which is really necessary. Actually, we have had a lot of experience already in Finland, and also good mechanisms and models which we have implemented here, but it's scattering and it's not so widely used. And actually, I think one of the problems we have had is that this knowledge about this method is not so well known. And now when we have this evidence, it's easier to have this approach promoted, and especially in area of health. The health professionals are very much keen on having research as a basis what we are doing, and because of that it's really, really important. What I think is good to take up is the multi-sectoral approach, which we in Finland have a long tradition. And arts there is one of the aspects which is very good, that now we have more information about what to do. As Rita Kaivos already mentioned, we have done much in Finland, and especially I want to, in the beginning, take up the role of the municipalities as a multi-sectoral arena. There are so much opportunities to work together, culture, social healthcare services, etc. And one aspect which also this report takes up is very highly on our political agenda just now is equity question. So we can use also arts and culture to promote equity in health and well-being. So there's a lot of very useful data and very useful evidence which we now have in hand, and it makes for us easier to implement this in practice.
Thank you. Riitta Kaivasoja, recognizing the added health value of engagement with the arts, as noted in the report, how can the Ministry of Education and Culture encourage arts and cultural organizations to make health and well-being an integral and strategic part of their work?
Yes, thank you. As Taru Koivisto already mentioned, it is the data and knowledge about the arts possibilities to healthcare and social welfare, of course, one of the key things the ministry can do. Then we have, of course, state subsidies. It is our arts promoting center who grants the state subsidies. They can help a little. It is a little help for the actors, the municipalities, to associations, and so on. And then I think one thing is the way how we cooperate and collaborate with the Ministry of Social Welfare and Health, because I think it's also a question of different cultures. Because we think, if we think the culture of culture organizations, the culture may be quite different for culture of healthcare and social care institutions, and so there have to be much collaboration, discussing and negotiating, so that you can find a way to collaborate together on the municipal level, on regional level, and especially now when we are targeting to the reform of social care and healthcare system, how to find the path to really find tools to change the situation even better in Finland.
Thank you, Riitta. And what about Taru Koivisto? How can the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health encourage social and healthcare organizations to make arts and culture an integral and strategic part of their work?
So that's a really good question. So there are different approaches. For example, by making arts and culture available in the institutions and in the services, so that it's a possibility to promote health and well-being of people. And another is to take care that also in the care, the treatment, all the methods which we have in place are taken there, because these are not so well known, not yet. And what is just now going on for a long time is our reform of the social healthcare services. And there is also an opportunity to take this approach, to have a multi-sectoral approach, to have different sectors work together for the health and well-being of people. So that's it's a challenge, of course, but it's also an opportunity, because the reform, I really hope that it's going to happen. And that time we need to have the structures and mechanisms, how the different sectors work together. But this is an opportunity now. We have now more data to provide and support this kind of approach.
Thank you. I think most of us think that collaboration between these two ministries has been enhanced quite a lot during 10 years. But what are the concrete next steps to strengthen the cross-sectoral collaboration in reference to arts and health field in Finland?
Well, I think we need structures, just as Taru said, because we can improve the situation, enhance project, but we need solid structures. And we have the working group. There are the ministries involved, but also agencies and municipalities and regional administration and associations and professionals and researchers. We need, I think, that kind of structures, and we should build a new working group, absolutely. But then we need, of course, also money, and there could be possibilities during the preparation of the new system, the reform for health and social care, how to find tools to the structures of social and healthcare system, and those funds there, and also municipalities, because you know that the budget of culture is very small, and it is not a solution to try to find money from that budget. It's not possible, even and especially now when it seems that the lottery funds and lottery money are going to go not upwards but downwards. So we need some structures, and we should think that the quality of social welfare and services and health care services is better if the arts are included in those services, and that is a major task. And also I think that it is not only that we think that how artists can provide well-being, we have to think also how we can bring well-being to artists. So they need salary for their work, and so we need structures, solid structures, not only some things which last only a couple of months or 2 years, but long-lasting structures are essential, I think.
And what about you, Taru Koivisto? What are the next steps, you think?
I think we have now a lot of evidence and also a lot of experience of good working methods from Finland and from other countries. So I think it's now essential to implement these good examples and good experiences, not just try to find new ones. So these good examples from Finland, we should share these with other areas, other municipalities, and support that kind of approach. We have had a lot of separate projects, as Rita mentioned. So, and all these should be now used as a basis. While, as I mentioned, we are now reforming our health and social services, so to take these in use. And of course, we need more information still about the economic aspect, for example, which is really necessary. I think we have to take this up also and try to evaluate what are the effects of different kind of activities. But once again, I'll take up the multi-sectoral approach, the cooperation which we need to have with different sectors, and create there, as Rita also said, different kind of networks and structures and mechanisms how to work together so that we can use the knowledge and experience of sector and culture in social and healthcare and vice versa. So to find ways how to work in practice. And one very practical issue is that now we have a report. We should use that. And we would like to translate some of parts of that to Finnish language so that it could be useful also. We could use it for our politicians and so that it's not just professionals which use it, but have main parts of that translated. Of course, it's up to the WHO and the writers if they give us a permission for that. But yeah, I see that there will be a permission. I hope so. So that we could use that because now we have the evidence.
Thank you. That sounds really important to have also this knowledge in Finnish language. At some point you have answered to this my question, but I still want to ask it to be more precise. So how can the two ministries together carry on the good work and facilitate the procurement and entrenchment of art and culture services in the social and healthcare system?
Yes, well, I think we have done already something. We wrote together with the with the ministries the recommendations for municipalities and regions at the beginning of this year, and we proposed there that there should be a civil servant or official in municipalities or in the regions administration to take care of these questions. You may think that this is very administrative thing, but I think it's not, because we have very different municipalities in Finland. We have a bigger one and smaller one, and there should be somebody who is taking care of these targets and put the targets to the municipalities and the regional administration. And if we set the targets, so we can evaluate them later on. And that is how it could go forward. Of course, also the financing picture is most important, research of course, and then we have a new legislation. It is in English, it's in Finland, it's laki kuntien kulttuuritoiminnasta. In English it is a new act on the municipality provision of cultural activities, and it lays down provisions on the municipality's duty to promote the arts and culture as part of residents' health and well-being, inclusion and community and engagement. And that is most important because we are going to monitor it by a national survey, Tieviisari, every 2 years. And of course, there is also in the new program of the new government, there is the targets for accessibility to culture for everybody and those big targets. So we should more and more think the big picture and how we can answer to the targets of the governmental program.
So it's easy to continue after Rita. who mentioned the so-called TEA Viisari, which is a unique information base in Finland. It has previously included data on the activities of municipalities on several areas of promotion of well-being and health. There have been physical activity and management of the municipalities and schools, etc. But now the new area is now the arts and culture. The first collection of data was done, as Rita said, just this year, and now we have a picture about the situation. What's the role and what are the activities of municipalities and what are the differences between municipalities? So we know where are the needs for development, and that will be used in the future as a basis for development. And legislation I want to also mention because there are these sectoral laws which provide the basis also for this kind of cooperation. In municipalities, they have been in Finland by law obliged to follow or monitor the health and well-being of inhabitants for about now almost 10 years. And also work together with different sectors and work together with NGOs. And one aspect there, the multi-sectoral approach, which is included in the law, is to have, for example, cultural and social healthcare services to work together. So that creates a unique opportunity, and I know there are not many countries in the world which have such kind of legislation as a basis for promotion of well-being and health. So we should use all these opportunities and basis to create also the necessary structures and working methods for this area as well.
And maybe we could also, or Finland could also take an international role in arts and health field. Like we are going to be the chairing Nordic Council of Ministers 21. So is that an opportunity, or what could we do?
Absolutely, I think the well-being is a common task for us all. But if I'm honest, I have to say that just now we are so full with our EU presidency questions because the Council of Ministers of Culture will be within 2 weeks, and actually we are so hands full of EU presence. Just now it is the high season of EU questions, as well as there's a structural fund negotiation of Creative Europe program, and trilogue is with the Parliament just going on. But after this month, I think we will go down to the next presidency we will have, and it will be the Nordic Council presidency, and that will be most important as well.
Yes, the EU presidency has taken rather much time, but we have been happy to have on social and healthcare field the priority theme, the economy of well-being, which also supports this kind of approach. So we have tried to take up the approach to have economic aspects and well-being policies on the same level, so that we are not thinking about separating money and then about the well-being and health and social services, which usually is just thought to be just a cost, but to take this a balanced approach so that these both support each other and need each other. So in a way we have already done rather much to promote this kind of approach. And about the international aspect, I want to take up also WHO's role. Finland have been rather active there for a long time, and so I'm quite sure we are going to support this arts and culture also to be one of the priorities there. Finland is just now also a member of WHO Executive Board, and because of that we have a good opportunity to have this also on global level. So really I'm quite sure that our experience, but also what the WHO is doing is something which we can work together.
Thank you so much, Riitta Kaivosoja and Taru Koivisto. Next, we will hear a bit more about social prescribing in the United Kingdom. Please welcome Deb Steele, expert by experience and peer project support officer, Creative Minds, United Kingdom.
Thank you. I'm a living example of social prescribing or arts and culture, and I'll start my story from right at the beginning. I started being involved with mental health services in the United Kingdom when I was about 8 years old, and from that there I've been in and out of the mental health system ever since. And about 9.5 years ago, I was told by the psychiatrist that I would always be ill, I would always be medicated, and I would never work again. I was on 21 tablets a day at that point in time. Sorry, let me just... It's not moving on. All right. I was on 21 tablets a day. I was often bedbound, and my children were my carers. I'd been medically retired from my last job, and I'd been on state benefits for 14.5 years. So I had no reasons to doubt that psychiatrist, and he was the expert. So I believed it. I didn't want to live like that, so I ended up taking an overdose. I thought I'd been given a terminal life sentence that I didn't want to live with any longer. And I woke up in hospital, quite annoyed that I'd woke up. Part of being discharged from that hospital was that I had to go see psychological services. Great, more services to be added to. I didn't really want that. But while I was sat there waiting for the assessment, I saw a leaflet, Art for Wellbeing. Never done art before. I don't know why I picked the leaflet up. I picked the leaflet up and I went to a taster session. I went along, everybody else seemed to know what they were doing. I didn't have a clue, couldn't draw. So if anybody in here says they can't draw, I'll dispute that, because that's what I used to say. And I started doing art. And suddenly something started being alive inside me. And I wanted to do more of it, and more, and more, and more. And I continued to keep wanting to do more and more and more, and keep improving in my life and my journey. And from that day on, I've never looked back. I've been off all medication for 8.5 years. I've been out of services for 4.5 years. And I work in the same NHS hospital as that expert who told me I'd never work again for, which is really interesting on the corridors. Now, to be fair, he has changed his process, and he won't ever say that again to anybody now. He won't ever give them that terminal life sentence that I felt I'd been given. And to me, it's really important to give people hope and aspirations, because I felt when he told me that I had none. I thought that there was nothing else to continue in life. I felt a burden to society, I felt a burden to my daughters, and I thought that was the only way out. Art gave me the life. It gave me a chance to start again. And I started doing talks initially to service users, because I thought, if that's the hope that we're giving people, I want to give them some hope that things can get better, that things can improve. So then the experts started asking, will you do a talk at our event? Yes, of course I will. I've done talks all over the country. I was invited to Buckingham Palace, which for me, I turned down initially because I thought I thought people were joking me. I've been an invisible service user in the mental health system. I've had a lot of people poke fun at me over the years. So I thought this was just somebody having a go at me and trying to tease me, so to speak. But I went along, and I was really pleased I went along and had fun. And I've been invited to Clarence House, Prince Charles's house. I've met him a couple of times. I've been places and done things that I never imagined an invisible service user would be, including standing here today. And it is an absolute honour to be able to be here to tell my story of how art not only saved my life, but changed it. It's transformed it to anything that I could ever imagine. If you can imagine being on 21 antipsychotic, antidepressant, antihistamine, sleeping tablets, you can imagine that I was little next to nothing. These paintings that are all springing up here, these are all my paintings. I've sold 128 paintings. I've had an exhibition at Canary Wharf in London. My life has just gone from strength to strength by a simple art class. Now, I would like to point out that from that art, when I found that leaflet in the psychology waiting room, I was put on a 19-month waiting list for services. I would not be here today if it wasn't for art. I was at crisis point. I still wanted to die when I picked that leaflet up. I still couldn't see a way forward. And had I not have had that chance of looking at or trying the arts, I have no doubts that I would not be here today to be able to tell my story. And to me, it's a really powerful story of hope and aspirations and giving life to people who feel like they haven't got any, who feel that there's no end to the suffering that they're dealing with. I believe this has a chance to revolutionise mental health services, certainly within the UK. I don't know in Finland, but within my country, it's a new chance. We've only had medication and counselling in the UK. Both have quite horrendous side effects. There's no side effects with social prescribing. You might get a bit of paint on your clothes. I can live with that. You might get a bit of dirt from the garden. Can live with that. You might even get an injury if you're doing something physical. Again, up to the side effects of the medication and counselling. They're negligible. They're worth living with. They're worth trying. And the next slide is me and my daughters. I was nominated for Yorkshire Woman of Achievement Award, which for me was absolutely amazing to be there with my daughters. And that is one of the poignant moments of my life when I walked in and seeing the look of pride on my girls' faces. They were my carers. They've looked after me. And to see them seeing mum in such a positive light, knowing that they weren't no longer worried about mum, that they could have their life. And it's important to say how much their life has changed, because my life's changed. They've seen this impact that I've had, and they've improved their lives. 2 of them have just qualified with degrees. They're out there, this small, simple art class has had such a profound effect, but it isn't just the one person it's had that effect on. It's had that effect on many, many people. And I'd just like to say I am really honoured, not just to be here to speak to you all about this art class, but to be able to bring a lived experience voice out there. It's about time we're getting heard, and arts has allowed me to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Debs, for your powerful participant perspective. Next, the roundtable discussion will be moderated by Niels. So, I ask you to take the stage.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Debs, for that really powerful, wonderful perspective, kind of from the ground, from somebody who has benefited from arts and health. I think that was really powerful. So we've kind of raced through this up until now. We've kind of talked at you for a lot of the time. We're going to do that for a little bit longer, but then we will give you the opportunity to ask questions and to engage with us. But for now, if I could, we're going to have a roundtable discussion with some colleagues from Norway, from Finland, from Sweden, and from the Nordic Council of Ministries. If I could please ask for Anna, Annika, Vegar, and Taru and Daisy to come up and join me here on the seats. And I think what we'll be doing is we'll be sharing the microphones around. And I'm going to give a very brief introduction. In the meantime, if you want to grab some water and make yourself comfortable and take a breath, I think that's perfectly well deserved. So the purpose of this roundtable is to kind of change gears a little bit. We've heard a lot from Daisy about the kind of the evidence base behind arts and health. We've heard from Debs about the impact of it. We've heard about the Finnish political context, but now we kind of want to step ahead and see if we can talk a little bit more practically about the political implications, the policy possibilities of arts and health, and how we might move this arts and health field into its next stage of life. And to do so, what I'd like to do is I'll be kind of having mini interviews with each of the roundtable members, but we'll also try to organically talk to each other. And I encourage all of you sitting here, if you feel like one of your colleagues is making a great point and you just want to kind of jump in and add something, please do that. We don't want to be too siloed. We want to be multidisciplinary and cross-sectoral and all those kinds of things. We'll do that for about half an hour or so, and then we'll have another opportunity for half an hour, 45 minutes for all of you to ask questions. And we've got one of these terrifying microphones, I think, which we throw into the audience, and then you have to catch them. And if you catch it, then you have to ask a question. I don't know what happens if you don't ask a question. So I'll start things off then. I want to start off by asking everybody the same question, which is, why does arts and health matter to you? How did you start out with arts and health? Why are you kind of interested in this area? Any bit of personal insight that we can get. But before I do that, I thought that I'd say a little bit about why I'm interested in this field. And I thought I would bring it home with a short anecdote about something that's happened in my life recently. So I have a mother, like we all do, who's 77 years of age, and she recently fell and she broke her hip. And for those of you who know about this kind of event, it's never a nice thing to happen to you at any point in your life. But at the age of kind of 60 and onwards, breaking your hip can have quite challenging consequences. Now, I don't want to sit here and pretend to say that on the day that she broke her hip, I wish there was an arts intervention that she could have done in order to heal her hip. I'm very glad that she was operated on the next day by a highly competent surgeon, and her hip was replaced. Although I would say I wish that the surgeon had known about the evidence that Daisy puts in her report about the benefits of listening to music for patients before they get wheeled into the operating theater. There's very good evidence to say that that has highly beneficial impact, but alas, that isn't that well known yet. But yes, I'm glad she was operated on. But in the kind of subsequent weeks since her operation, it's become incredibly clear to me that the operation is the easiest part of this process. The surgeon who operated on her had 6 other surgeries that day. It's a fairly bread and butter operation for him. It's something that he does hundreds of times a year. So the operation was the first step. But since then, my mother's had to learn to walk again. She's had to rehabilitate her legs. She has to strengthen both her muscles and her will to just get out of bed, to do things, to integrate back into society, to form bonds and connections with people that she might not want to see anymore because she's just lacking energy. And it's occurred to me that this is exactly the kind of space that arts and health operates. And we all have mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers who are in these situations, who can benefit deeply from these moments, but who are just not aware that these opportunities exist. And I guess I would put that question out to anybody. If you had the option to refer your loved one or even participate yourself in a intervention like the ones that we've heard about today, it seems like an obvious choice. It should be an obvious choice for people. So that's kind of where I think my interest and my passion in this area lies. I'm going to sit down now, and I'm going to start us off. I'm going to start us off perhaps a little bit more theoretically, with a bit more a few more questions about the kind of research area before we kind of more firmly, more strongly go into the policy domain. And I'll introduce each of our colleagues, particularly those who you haven't met, as I go on and ask them questions. So my first question, as I said, I'm going to ask of everybody, and I'll ask of you as well, Daisy. I think you at this point don't need an introduction anymore. But Daisy, can you tell us a little bit about why you started out on this field?
Well,
I think you might, yeah.
Well, as you mentioned at the start, Niels, is this working? Yes. I was very lucky to have a kind of dual background in that when I did my PhD, I was working part-time and doing my PhD part-time. And my work was in hospitals in the UK where I was managing clinical innovations programs. And a lot of the programs that we were implementing were arts-based innovations. And the reason behind this was because we realized that the arts innovations were the ones that seemed to capture the attention and imagination of the healthcare professionals and the patients the most. So there seemed a ready appetite within these hospitals to be having these interventions. And so I worked very closely with the clinicians, discussing with them what challenges they were facing day to day in their work with their patients. And we looked at which of these challenges we could address with the arts. Now, of course, we couldn't solve everything, but it was remarkable how many of the problems we were able to address with arts-based innovations. And it became almost a challenge. How could we use the creativity of the arts, even for things where you couldn't see an initial link? Even things like how you could reduce the rates of did not attend patients in clinics by trying to use the arts as a better way of communicating and engaging with these patients. And alongside this, I was doing my PhD, as Niels said, in psychoneuroimmunology. So it was very quantitative. It was based in labs. I was doing lab work. I was doing lots of statistics. I was working on clinical trials. So it gave me this fantastic overlap between a real immersion in the arts and a real immersion in medical research. So that enabled me to think there was a way that we could be combining both of these. And my particular interest being in these kinds of medical methods, I started looking more and more at how we could apply biological studies and big data statistical studies in order to understand the arts better.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Vegard, if I could ask you, but before I do, can I introduce you? Vegard is a researcher at the National Centre for Culture, Health and Care in Norway, and a postdoctoral fellow at the Hunt Research Center at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So he's kind of coming at us from their Norwegian background, both the academic, but also we'll have some policy questions for you as well.
Yeah, thank you. If I start with the academic person of me, why I introduce it, I am a physical activity epidemiologist. So I very influence on physical activity. But actually the first time I started in the arts and health was, firstly, it's based on the epidemiologic studies. We see that cultural participation, the effects on health. But first time I was introduced was a small study we had on dementia patient. We use music, dance and movement. And then the physical activity in me woke up, because when this was a person that are sitting, you know, the dementia, they're sitting and you don't get the attention from them, they're not speaking. But when we started to use music, she started to move her hands, and I did see physical activity. He did this clap, and actually she started speaking. And she hasn't done that on 4 months. And then we used arts methods to try to get attention from the dementia, and we see this influenced her. So that's the start of my part of the arts and health, actually, both academic and personal. And we know everybody feels when they listen to music. We get the emotion, we get crying, we get happy and all that. So that's important, yeah.
Thank you, Vegard. Anna, can I ask you to share with us a reason why you think arts and health is interesting to you? Anna Starbrink is the County Council Healthcare Commissioner for Culture and Innovation in Stockholm County Council in Sweden. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this important report. I think it's is a fantastic tool to use in the future. But to me, this started as a personal thing, just like for you, Nils. 13 years ago, my mother went ill. She had a brain tumor and she died soon after. And it came clear to me how important culture and arts was to her. She was a strong, independent woman, and suddenly she was reduced to just a patient or maybe even a diagnose. But when I could help her to get connected to the art life again, we went to some art exhibitions. Then she became my mother again. She became herself again for a short while. And that showed me how important that was to her quality of life, and to our relationship. So that's where it started to me. And then, since I am a politician, I thought I need to do something. I need to bring this into the culture, to the politicians, the political decision making. And I also seen some fantastic examples in the healthcare, how we can use art and culture to provide a better healing process. So, but it started all with my mother, just like for you.
Thank you. Taru, could you share with us why you think this is a particular interest or relevance to your life?
I have worked for state administration for a long time, almost 30 years. And all the time I have been involved in promotion of well-being and health. So while in Finland, promotion of well-being and health, it's very multi-professional, multi-sectoral, and we have always taken the approach, not just healthcare, but to work together with other sectors. And that's the background for me. It's part of my work career very strongly. And art wasn't so much included there, thinking about 20 years ago. It came later there, but of course it's somehow like a self-evident part of one of the sectors which is very important, one of the approaches which is very useful for promotion of well-being and health. And so that's the background. So it's difficult to describe any specific happening or anything behind that. It just built in the promotion of well-being and health. And somehow Finland have been very much promoting the approach of health in all policies already from 2006. So such a long time. It's and so it's built in the approach of this health. And nowadays we are speaking more about health and well-being in all policies. So that's the background why this is important for me. It's difficult to even think that art and culture not to be included in these activities.
That's very enlightened, I have to say there. Probably not that many ministries that necessarily come from that same position. So I'm very glad to hear it, and obviously one of the reasons why we're here today. Last but certainly not least, Annika Starbrink is Söderlund, sorry. Annika Söderlund is Senior Advisor at the Department for Culture and Resources at the Nordic Council of Ministers. We've invited you here to kind of give us a sense also of the wider, the state of the art, as it were, of the wider Nordic region. But perhaps you can start us off also with a bit of insight why you think arts and health is important.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Debs, for really inspiring talk. Arts and culture has been, for as long as I can remember, a part of my life. Important part of my life. As an art historian, I'm very interested in visual arts, design, architecture. And for example, when I visit a new city, I like to get to know the place by walking around, looking at the architecture, getting fresh air and exercise, and also get to know the built environment. Art and culture reduces the stress level, helps to relax, and as we all know For example, reading a good book takes us to another reality, makes us feel good, the same way as digging in the garden or carefully restoring old houses that I'm also interested in. So yes, creativity, art, culture, that's awfully good, I think.
Thank you. Daisy, maybe we can grab the other microphone there. That way we have a couple more options. So I'm gonna start with you and ask you a few questions. But again, the invitation is very much to others as well. If you feel like you want to say something, we'll gladly pass the microphone on. So we've kind of done the round here and talked a little bit about why art matters to us. And I think what comes through in most of the answers is that there's a kind of personal belief element here. There's a kind of personal conviction element. And I think that's a blessing, I think, because often it's what drives motivation, but it's also a bit of a curse, because we often find that the people who are most the most visible people behind these kind of interventions are people who have a personal reason for being there. And inevitably that leads us to this terrain where people perhaps criticize the arts and health for its anecdotal evidence as opposed to its kind of scientific evidence. And I guess one of the reasons why we've published this report is to push back about that. But can you tell us a little bit more about, as a researcher who's been deeply engaged in this topic for a while, what are the kind of, what do you see as the reasons for the skepticism, as it were, or why there might still be some skepticism? And this is also bearing in mind that there are some countries, I think in the Nordics perhaps, and also the UK, where the skepticism is perhaps on the wane. But there are definitely still many other countries in Europe and in the world where arts and health is not on the map and is still viewed quite skeptically. Why do you think that is?
I think there are a few reasons. I think, first of all, because this is such an interdisciplinary field, the research from this field gets published in such a wide range of journals, both medical, social science, and arts and humanities. So it genuinely is very difficult to piece all of that evidence together. And certainly writing this report, we had to dig very hard to get some of the studies because they were in places we weren't expecting. So I think that's been one of the issues, is people have been wondering, well, where is the evidence? And it's not been easy to find a really good synthesis of it. So that's what we've been hoping this report will provide, both a really good synthesis of the evidence, but also that hundreds of references for where people can go and look for further studies. I think a second reason has been that a lot of this evidence has started to accumulate over the last couple of decades, even though we've had anecdotal and written discussions of the arts for hundreds and thousands of years. So I think it's been quite difficult to separate some of the previous discussions that might have been slightly more myth-based or superstition-based from thousands of years ago from the actual rigorous evidence that's been happening for the last couple of decades. So I think that's been another issue. I think there are certain types of studies that we're still very much working on at the moment. So the clinical trials on arts and health have particularly been over the last 10, 15 years or so. Epidemiological evidence on arts and health has really been over the last few years. That's been driven, I know, predominantly by Nordic countries and particularly in the UK with my team over the last 2 years on UK data sets. So some of this stuff is very recent to be coming out. But I also think there's a third issue, which isn't necessarily a downside, but I think we need to value, which is that the arts are emotional and people do have personal stories to them. And the truth is that most people can't get that emotional about a hip replacement, hip surgery. It's not, I mean, it's obviously wonderful for the people who have it and the surgeons who do it, but it's not the most emotional of treatments, whereas arts interventions are very emotional. And therefore, people get these very strong responses. They want to talk about it. They want to share anecdotes. And I think sometimes this is seen as a downside in terms of, oh, people are talking about anecdotes. Whereas what we really need to say is, yes, they're talking about anecdotes underpinned by robust research. Isn't it brilliant that we have both?
I think that's a really good point, and something that we struggle with also within WHO, the idea of the kind of hierarchy of evidence, and you know that RCT trials are kind of at the top and anecdote, as it were, is at the bottom. But the idea of using what we like to kind of slightly rephrase as narrative research and narrative evidence, and capitalizing on exactly this strength within arts and health is probably something that we can that we really need to champion a bit more, so that even within contexts like WHO and very science-minded organizations, we create the space where that kind of evidence can be taken more seriously. There's another issue, I think, if we drill down on some of the topics that have been mentioned today. I think several of you talked about the importance of health economics and how we still need research in that area. But you also, I think, talked a little bit about the importance of trying to understand arts and health at scale. What happens when you move from just one community program to something that gets rolled out across the entire country? And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about that. I know you're involved in a project that is trying to do exactly that in the UK.
Yes, so I think a lot of the clinical trials that we've had so far have had to be relatively small in scale or local. And I think something we've not had as much up is scale up of clinical trials. So if we liken this to drug studies, we've had a lot of phase 1 and early phase 2 clinical trials in arts, but we've not had the later phase 2 or phase 3 trials as much. So I'm working on a program called Shaper, which is a new program funded by the Wellcome Trust in the UK, which is joint between University College London, where I work, and King's College London, which is trying to do just that. It's trying to scale up interventions that already have good clinical evidence behind them, but take them up to the next level, involving more people as larger scale clinical trials. But there's also a second aim here, which is that lots of the studies that we do, they focus on outcomes. They don't necessarily focus on the implementation process. And this is key because it's one thing to show efficacy and effectiveness, but if these trials aren't actually if these programs aren't actually going to fit within health services, they're not actually going to be able to work smoothly alongside the other treatments available, then they're not going to be delivered long term. So the other thing that we're doing with the Shaper project is to actually research the process of implementing and embedding these interventions within the health service in the UK. And this will help us with these specific interventions to understand how they work and how we can get them to work. But it'll also give us a blueprint for how other interventions that have got good initial evidence can be taken to that next stage and can be embedded, hopefully, long term within their health services.
So I might take a quick break away from you here, Daisy, and ask you, Vegard. This question of scale is something that keeps coming back, and as Daisy was saying, I mean, it's important to understand how these interventions fit in within health systems or policy initiatives at a larger scale. Now, something that we're a little bit familiar with in our team, partly because my colleague Andrea is Norwegian, she's kind of talked very enthusiastically about this, is the cultural rucksack scheme in Norway. Can you tell us a little bit about that by any chance, and maybe we can explore whether or not there is actually any basis for using that kind of approach to roll something out on a kind of culture and health level at scale?
Yeah, I think the important is how we should implement is crucial. The second is, I think it's different in Norway. This area, arts and health, is initiated from the health sector. And that is also crucial to succeed. Because, and I also think we have worked a lot about to going from cooperation to collaborate together. Mm-hmm. Not only cooperate, but real collaborate between the sectors. And with the cultural sector, it's initiated from the education, mm-hmm. Work with the culture sector, and we try to implement it in the schools. Mm-hmm. And similar as the center that I'm representing, the arts, health, and it's crucial that the initiative is from the health sector, and we work together with the aim that everybody understand. And we use the arts and cultural methods and systems together work with that in the health sector.
And I'm just gonna push you slightly on this cultural rucksack scheme. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that it's basically a Norwegian initiative that enables or that supports the development or the participation, cultural participation amongst all school children across the country, so that throughout the year, young students. School-age children have the opportunity to participate in these kinds of cultural activities, and that, I mean, I think what's interesting about it is that it's a scheme that's really pushed out at the national level, giving opportunities to the entire kind of school-age population.
Every first to fourth grade children are engaged and incorporated in. They are reintroduced a song in the schools, and so that's on the national level. Every children in grade 1 to 4.
And I guess I'm interested in, perhaps you don't know the answer to this, but in running out this scheme, in kind of promoting this scheme, has health ever been part of the discussion, or has it been a kind of question of culture being a Norwegian right, as it were, rather than its potential health benefits and the benefits for schooling per se? As Daisy's report points out, there are many reasons why engaging with art at that age can have developmental benefits.
Yeah, and you have this social cohesion, and they work together, and absolutely, it's health benefits to include this in the schools. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you, Daisy, for maybe one or two more questions. Moving into the policy realm in the UK, I know there's quite a lot of activity. I mean, we have been talking a bit about the Nordic region here, and because I think there is quite a lot of policy interest, deeply held policy interest in the Nordic region. It seems to. Arts and health seems to kind of gel very well with the Nordic mentality and the Nordic way of thinking. But there's also a huge amount of activity in the UK. You've mentioned some of the social prescribing work that's going on. Can you give us a kind of brief oversight about some of the things that are happening?
I think what we have in the UK particularly is an incredibly engaged and active grassroots arts sector. So we've got a phenomenal number of arts organisations, freelance arts practitioners who want to work in this space and who are actively developing and delivering programmes. And I think it's been really heartening over the last few years that we've seen increased buy-in from our arts councils into this, in supporting these kinds of programmes and in terms of integrating health and well-being within their strategies. Something we've been particularly trying to push over the last few years as well is the link between the arts and the health sector. And we've had an all-party parliamentary group on arts and health, which produced its own report about 2 years ago, and has been really trying to engage our politicians in this space and to try and support the linkages. And social prescribing is a great example that's come out of this very joined-up approach between the health sector and the arts sectors to try and support people to transition from primary care, from health, into engaging in arts programmes. I think the challenge at the moment is that we're having a lot of political changes going on. So I think what we're trying to hope and move towards is a position where we have these long-term sustainable programmes, and also hopefully the view that this topic is not political, but that it's something that is apolitical and should continue regardless of which government is in power, because it is recognised that the evidence is strong enough and that the benefits are clear enough.
And one other thing that's perhaps worth pointing out is that there are some funders that are moving into this area, or that are kind of quite established in this area.
Yes, I think the arts activities that are going on, we've had some fantastic engagement with funders who've been funding these. And I think something I've been particularly pleased about is that research funders are really keen on this topic at the moment, because there's a big move towards interdisciplinary research. And that's what this is naturally. So I think it's really good that we've got that type of support, both for the active projects and programs themselves, as well as for the research.
Thank you, Daisy. Thanks for now. Vegard, maybe I can ask you on the back of that question as well. to say a little bit more about how arts and health is embedded in the Norwegian model, both in terms of on the policy level, but also perhaps in relation to funding. For instance, your center, how is that funded? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think it's similar as Daisy said that. But in Norway, we had the last 3 years, 35 projects are financed both from the health sector and from the culture sector. The center is financed actually by the Department of Municipality. And it's also important because health is growing where people live, in the municipality. The money is coming from the Department of Municipality, and we work closely with the municipality, with the county, state, and with the university that have research and education. And the important here is to put practical challenge in a framework that everyone can see and read. So again, as I mentioned instead, I think it's important that the initiative is coming from the health to understand how we can use it and to get to implement it. But also that actually the money is coming from the municipality.
Annika, sorry, Anna, I'm sorry. Do you want to come in on that real briefly about the kind of importance of the municipality, given that you kind of represent the municipality?
Well, I can't represent the municipality because I'm a politician on the region level. But I think it's so important what you are saying, that it has to be the initiative needs to come from the healthcare sector. In my experience is that at least in Sweden and in Stockholm, it's been the cultural sector, the culture life, who's talking about this for many years. But first, just a few years ago, it became an issue in the healthcare, and then it started to happen things. So I think it's a very important thing to understand that the healthcare sector and the cultural life are so different. They have different cultures, you can say. I mean, the healthcare demand evidence, of course, that they should. But the artist demands freedom and creativity, and if you put that together, you really need to find a language that you can understand each other, and that's not so easy. But I think that this report really helps us because it shows that there is evidence.
So I just want to latch on to that question of language. How have you found the language, as it were, to support? Because you're also kind of a unicorn to some extent in that you have such a deep interest in the arts yourself, a background in the arts, and you're now operating in the healthcare sector. So I guess you're uniquely positioned to give us a sense about how you've managed to convince your colleagues in the healthcare sector about the importance of arts. What is the language that you've developed?
First of all, I love to be introduced as a unicorn. Well, I think it's an unusual combination of responsibilities with both arts and culture and healthcare in the same portfolio. And I can, in my position, I can bring people together. And when people come together and start talk, they start to understand each other. And hopefully I have been able to build some bridges between the culture life and the healthcare. But I would say that the most important thing is the collaboration with the Karolinska Institutet, the prominent medical university in Stockholm, and to work together with them to provide evidence and to provide this language that we need to share. That has been very, very helpful.
Vega, coming back to you, I'm aware. Oh, sorry. Did you want to?
Yeah, when we're talking about the language, the language is directly relevant for the field of work, the healthcare, they understand. And when we put this in a documentable framework and systematically, as the synthesis report do, then we can help us to bring us together and to put it on a political agenda further. So I think it's crucial to have the systematically documented framework, and it's relevant for the field.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I completely agree, and I hope this report is the kind of first step, or I mean, it's not the first step, but one of the steps in that direction. But I still think that at the end of the day, you end up talking to humans, right? You end up talking to people who are ministers of health, who are ministers of culture, who are on the municipality, on whichever board, and you have to convince them of this or that. And it might help to be able to pull out a report that is quite thick and well researched and well referenced. But at the end of the day, you still have to find a language to try and get them to open up to you, to open up to the possibility of the benefits of this, to get them to be motivated to read the report, to open the report and at least read the summary. So I know that you recently met with Bent Høie, the Norwegian Minister of Health and Care Services. And if you can, if it's not too top secret, can you share with us a little bit about, you know, how did you engage with him? What did you say? How did you? What was your impression of that meeting? And you know, did you manage to change minds? Did you have to change minds? How did that come about?
He is well aware that we are working on a commitment on that. But this last meeting you are referring to was that we have this national educational program in music-based caregiving for health and care workers. And this is crucial, and he is very aware that it's important for him that we adapt the cultural methods in the daily care workers. And that what we're talking about, how to implement arts and health, arts and culture in the daily care, so we could use these methods for the patient, and they are getting good of that. But he had one question. He was also concerned about more research that can document the positive demonstrations, but also how to implement the arts culture methods in the health field. And he want to have some more research how we implement, what is the barrier to implement it in the daily care.
So maybe that would be a good moment to move back to you, Anna. As a healthcare commissioner, presumably you have some say in some of the funding that gets spent in relation to healthcare. How do you justify spending money on arts and health? I mean, you know, one of the questions that I was asked in the lead up to this panel by a reporter was, yeah, but isn't this just a kind of nice to have? You know, isn't arts and health? You know, at the end of the day, you want emergency services, you want kind of you want your hospitals in place, you want to have those hip surgeons on the ready in case something happens. All this other stuff it's just a nice extra. I don't know if you ever get those questions, but how do you kind of answer that call, as it were?
Well, of course, you shouldn't choose between trauma care or cancer care and some nice music event. You need both. You need to be a whole human. You need to get all the medical treatments that are necessary for you, but you also need the cultural impact and the arts that also are necessary to you. And now we have some evidence. You've shown that today. So let's use that. Of course, the budget for culture in healthcare is very small, but it's also very important. And it's not very expensive. It's not the most expensive part of the healthcare, and it shouldn't be. But it should be a part of healthcare, not something you bring in if you have some extra money to spare, or bring in if you have some extra time. This should be a part of the healthcare that's included. I think in every part of the healthcare system you need this. And sometimes just, for example, Florence Nightingale, I loved her. 200 years ago, she said something like, I have it here because it's so good. She said, the craving for variety in the starving eyes is just as important as food in the starving stomach. And I guess that really what this is about. You need both. You need all the things that makes your body feel good, but you also need all the things that makes your mind feel good.
And that, I mean, I think is the strongest argument for saying that it is more than a nice to have. You know, it is a fundamentally important part of the healthcare process.
Yes, it is. It is. It's not just fun to have or good to have. It's important. It's part of life. We don't just want to survive or get treated so we can stay alive for a few months more. We want that life to be important and to be good for us and to have a good quality of life.
Taro, can I ask you a kind of a similar question on that? Again, you have a long-standing experience within WHO with the various member states. I don't suspect this topic has come up very much in those conversations, so you're probably not going to be able to draw on a direct example. But theoretically, could you imagine having these kind of conversations with other member states where arts and health really isn't on the agenda, where arts and health is kind of far removed, where there are still questions around basic health systems and so forth? How could you engage with them on this topic, or should one engage with them on this topic?
Surely we should make an effort to have this an approach for all of our member states. But as you said, it's the situation in different countries in Europe or even around the world is very different. And because of that, it's not an easy task. And as you said, there haven't been much of these kind of discussions among member states. But you have to start from somewhere. And if you have evidence to show that it's useful to do, so it's always a better starting point for that. And I think that's the situation in most countries, even in Finland and other Nordic countries, I think, as well. There's much to do. And we need to have a very good reasoning for what we are doing and why this is important. For politicians, culture and art, it's for some of them it's a value, but for most of them we need to show why this is useful, what are the effects of activities, and if we can show that this is useful and we can, for example, decrease the institutionalization or have a shorter time in hospitals or cut the costs. Of course, these kind of all this kind of data is very valuable and very useful, and that's something which politicians want to have. And now we have it. We have sometimes very hard evidence about how effective different activities are. Sometimes we have just the experience, but experience is also evidence, so that we can show that there have been some successes. And for example, there are very practical examples. Would like to take up the question of equity. In Finland, for example, the social and healthcare sector is using really good methods how to promote, for example, young people's participation in the society. Not to have marginalized groups, or because there's a lot of dangers for young people, especially boys nowadays, to get aside from the society. So that culture and arts could be used there to support other groups of people as well, to support them to participate in the society. There are young people, migrants, unemployed. All these, there are very good examples. And there you can, if you can show that for politicians, for policymakers, that it's useful to use this kind of approaches, then you get the support for implementation of these kind of activities. And I want to come back to the role of the municipalities, which was raised already from Sweden and Norway. as I already mentioned earlier, the role of the municipalities in Finland is also very strong, and it's really a good opportunity to have in the municipality all the sectors and the municipality being responsible for all of these basic services for people. Then it's a good opportunity to use different approaches to support the health and well-being of people. And especially if there's a legislation based on which activities of the municipality is based, as in Norway and Finland, we have a very strong base there for the politicians to be responsible about the decisions they are making, and also while taking into account the different approaches and work together with the different sectors. So legislation, I think, is very good also as a basis for pushing the politicians to the right direction. For example, in Finland, the municipalities are obliged to make a report on well-being every year, and present that to the politicians every 4 years, a broader report. And these reports include the situation, the description of situation, and also plans how to take these into account in the plans and budgets, etc. And there, the culture is one of a part of that. And then you have a common report for the whole municipality. It creates a common platform to work. It's part of a planning of the whole municipality. And then that's something many municipalities or politicians in Finland describe this as the process of producing these kind of reports and plans together creates an opportunity and common understanding what should be done and what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. So to have a common picture and common plans for all the sectors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, trying to deploy the vocabulary that is important and current in the various ministries or municipalities, countries, even on a regional level, is very important. And health equity, you mentioned that, is clearly one of those. I want to address that and maybe ask you again in a second, Daisy, if you could say a word or two about it. I want to address that in particular because I think there can often be this perception that arts is actually elite. You know, that those people who engage in arts and health interventions are people of a certain social status or with a certain type of background, and that in fact it is anything but equal. But I think the report has shown, and I think you can perhaps say a little bit about that from your experience and as a researcher and a practitioner, that in fact there's a tremendous opportunity here in terms of health equity.
So what we found is that, yes, there is a social gradient across certain types of arts participation. We tend to see this more for traditional high art activities like going to museums, galleries, or participating in things like learning musical instruments. And we see this more amongst adults. Interestingly, that the studies we've done on children, we've found that there is a gradient across participation outside of schools, but there doesn't seem to be in schools. And this is important because when we're having the question about why is it important to have arts in schools, one of the reasons it's important is that is a way of getting every single child. Whereas if we rely on children engaging in the arts outside of schools, that is inherently going to be driven by their parents' situations and their parents' past experience. But what's interesting is that, yes, there is a social gradient in participation, but there is no evidence that people of lower socioeconomic status benefit less from the arts. In fact, it seems to be the opposite. People who have got lower levels of socioeconomic status, or people who are living in poverty, or people who are living in more challenging situations, seem to benefit more from arts engagement. So this is very encouraging because it suggests that the arts can have benefits for everybody, but we just have to give people the access. And I think that's an important policy area for us all to think about because it's something where there is an obvious opportunity to intervene and to try and make sure that people have got those access opportunities in childhood, but also across their lifespan and particularly as they age too.
Thank you, Daisy. We're beginning to run out of time, so I do want you to start thinking of your questions. As I said, the microphone of doom is going to come out in a moment, and we'll cast it into the audience. But before I go there, Annika, I also wanted to ask you a few questions, because I think you're a very important kind of person in this arena, in the sense that you kind of have a bit of an overview of what's happening in the Nordic region, and you can kind of perhaps give us a bit of insight about where next, at least on the Nordic level. I think there's another question out there: where next for WHO in the region and so forth, and in the globe, indeed. But perhaps you can say a little bit about the Nordic Council of Ministers, its role, and what you've done in this terrain, in this area of arts and health.
Yes.
Would you like to hear?
Well, currently we're actually working with our new vision for the Nordic Council of Ministers, which states that the Nordic region will become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. In my opinion, culture and health plays a very important role in achieving this. Of course, with many other topics and issues as well. In 2015, we commissioned a mapping of best practices, research, and education in culture and education within the Nordic region. Unfortunately, at that point, it didn't result in any further work. I guess the time wasn't right at that point, but I really do hope that along with this WHO report, the work will really fire up, so to say. Sweden had a conference last year, in 2018, during its presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers on culture and health. The conference focused on how art and culture could complement traditional care and welfare. Within the culture sector, we are working on our new cultural collaboration program. It's a 4-year program, along with our vision. Culture and health is also part of this process, an important part of this process.
So perhaps just to push you slightly, I know you can't really talk about the future in the same way that you can about the past, but you did mention that there have been kind of stops and starts within arts and health. There have been attempts to bring it to the table, and there's clearly a continued interest. What do you think is necessary to kind of to fire this process up, as it were, to get it running? And perhaps the report here is one of the things that does that. But is there anything else that you feel might be necessary to be put in place before ministers across the region can really get behind it?
Of course, there has to be an interest in all 5 Nordic countries, Faroe Islands, Greenland, and Åland Islands, which are part of the Nordic Council of Ministers, within both sectors, both culture and the social and health sector. The culture sector has been and is interested in this topic. That said, some countries find it more, some less interesting. This applies also to the social sector, where the interest has been somewhat lamer, unfortunately. Yes, I think the most important thing is that there has to be a common interest. We cannot try and start working on something if the countries doesn't back up, so to say, and the different sectors, and the people in the different countries can affect their ministries. I mean, it's also a regional and local question.
Yes, go ahead, Vigar.
maybe it's time that the Nordic Ministry, because they have separate meeting, culture and health. Maybe it's the time that I have a joint meeting and put this on the agenda. I think it's time to do that, to talk about it and discuss further.
Absolutely. That would be interesting.
I mean, that is perhaps my last question, and this is to all of you before I pass over to the audience, is this question of multi-sectoral, interdisciplinarity, whatever you want to call it in different fields, different arenas. It has different names, but the basic challenge is kind of what you were saying, Daisy, is that you're trying to bring together either commitments or evidence or people from a variety of places. You were kind of saying, in order for this to work, you kind of have to convince the ministries of health and welfare, as well as the ministries of science and education or culture and research. And while the benefits of having everybody on board is, of course, huge and can amplify the effects, it is still perhaps a higher threshold of getting things started. I don't know if maybe we start with you. If you have some kind of insight into how you can get your colleagues from the other side to kind of just your colleagues to talk with you and be interested in this work.
Well, actually, we are talking already.
Okay.
We have a very good collaboration within the Secretariat of the Nordic Council Ministers, and there's an interest for this, but we cannot do it alone. We need the backup from our senior officials in all the 8 countries, and then of course the ministers, both sectors.
Does anybody else want to kind of briefly comment on this, just from the perspective of not necessarily where it works, because obviously if it works and multi-sectorality, if your colleagues are working with you, that's great, but where it doesn't work, where you found it difficult, and what you've done to or any tips and tricks, as it were, that you can give us to help engage with other sectors.
If I may continue.
Yes, please.
I think there needs to be an understanding on both sides why this is useful. Because of that, we need the data. We need to show that there's some benefit for the other sector to work with us, or vice versa. So that's something. People are so busy and have everyone own objectives and priorities. If you can't show that there's useful way to work together and have something in common, work together and reach some common objectives or solve common problems. So that's something. And I think now we have, for example, on this area, evidence. And many countries have very good examples of experience on this area. So we don't always have evidence, but however, we have some experience which we could share. If other Nordic countries have good examples about what's working, so that's attractive for other sector or other countries to join together and try to take this approach forward.
Thank you. Any other comments before I open it up to the floor? In which case, I think we've made you all wait long enough. I've never done this. Are you going to?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, perfect. So I don't have to. But perhaps Debs, we have a question. Yeah, straight away.
It's more a statement, really. I didn't mention it in my talk, but the arts class that I did lasted just less than 2 years, cost less than 1 year's medication alone. And they've done social investment and return on my journey, and they've got to £33,000 per year, what they're saving on my journey. But to me, yes, money is important, I'm aware of that, but it's about people's quality of life. How can we capture that? How can we, 10 years ago, I was an invisible service user laid in a bed, doped up on medication. Now I'm here at this World Health Organisation talking about my journey. How can we capture that and value that for what it is, rather than just, you've had a great journey?
I think that's a really good point, and also a kind of culture change question. I mean, I think valuing these kinds of narratives as much as we value, as it were, hard evidence, and bearing in mind that hard evidence often is also subject to all sorts of questions and interpretations. It's never as hard as we think it is. But valuing that kind of narrative that you give, that you bring to the equation, and is something that I think certainly within our organization we still have to work hard at to change that culture. Does anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something we have discussed a lot with our authorities, that what is legal evidence for these changes. And still they are very strict, but I think it's very important to bring that up. Actually, it's important for that we are here for. That's for the people, the persons.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and I think what I'd add is that this is why in the report we didn't focus on any particular methodological approach, but we took a very broad angle on what was constituting evidence in this case. Because, I mean, if we were designing a study that was just focused on what Debs has spoken about today, it would be very tempting just to focus on the mental health symptoms on their own over a 6-month period, and that would fail to capture everything else that you spoke about so wonderfully in your presentation, and also the longer term impact that this has had. And as you state, not just the impact on you, but on those around you in your family and in your community. And no single research approach is ever going to capture that complex picture, which is why we have to make sure that we keep taking multiple different disciplinary and methodological approaches on this topic, because it is complex and capturing complexity is possible, but we have to make sure that we keep that creativity in our research minds as we do it.
Anyone else for now? Otherwise, I think there was a question, just there.
This is nice. Hi, my name is Stefan. I came all the way from Romania just to spend a few hours with you here for the launch of this report. Thank you for it. I think you did a wonderful job. And this panel is the best I've had in a long while, I think, so thank you for this as well. I'm the director of a Cluj Culture Center. This is an NGO that brings together 100 institutions and organizations from culture, academia, business, and the public administration in my city, which is the second largest in Romania. And we try to look at what sort of contribution can culture bring to society in terms of social transformation, well-being, and local development. And since this panel this conversation was so good, and it was a level that is absolutely sci-fi to most of the European countries, my question is, how do you connect? How can we connect this with what the European Commission is trying to do? Because I'm sure you know that in the new agenda for culture, well-being is among the 5 priorities, but is the least documented one, and it's not backed up by anything.
I'm looking at you, Taro. Maybe you want to say a couple of words about this, but I think it's such an important point. We kind of we're talking about the Nordic region. We talk about the UK, where a lot of the stuff is deeply embedded, where research is already active, where political commitments already exist. But this is one of these topics that is so translatable everywhere. How do we kind of make that leap?
Yes, that's a good question, and also a big challenge. I already mentioned what the WHO could do. For example, this issue and this report will be on the agenda next year in the regional committee. So the administrative body is deciding about the future activities of the European region's WHO activities. And that's something where all the countries have an opportunity to hear what has been done and what are the background documents, etc. So I think it's very useful for all member states to make their authorities aware of this, so that they can support this activity in the administrative bodies, for example, regional committee. So that's WHO. And then EU, I mentioned earlier that Finland, just now having a presidency, is taking forward the approach on economy of well-being. And that's something, there will be the council, there is the council conclusions already on this, just published 2 weeks ago, if I remember correctly. But it's just the beginning. There are the conclusions now, but it's just the basis for activities. We really hope that it will continue and all countries can have a support for implementation nationally, but also so that the Commission and the whole EU will take this approach forward, so that all sectors take health and well-being into account and not just economic aspects. So that's something, but it's just the beginning. But we are really hoping in Finland that it will be as successful as health in all policies, which was a previous priority theme of Finland in 2006. So, but we need the support from all countries and experts as well, so that we can in practice take this forward in EU. So a lot of to do, but we have good examples and good, I think there's a lot of support for this kind of thinking and approach. So having economic and well-being policies at the same level, and there, of course, should be one of the part also of a cultural aspect. EU has a lot of to do on that area as well.
I think the point about examples is super relevant. You know, the fact that in these countries, UK and Nordic countries, there are a lot of examples. There are a lot of people with expertise, and I think what characterizes this domain is that the people who work within it are hugely passionate and very willing to give their time and to work with you and explore together how some of these things might be relevant in other countries. So I hope I'm speaking on behalf of everybody to say that, you know, reach out certainly to us. Yeah, perfect.
Paula Karhunen from the Arts Promotion Center, Finland. Now that we fully agree about the evidence and the impact of the arts on health, could one of the conclusions or maybe policy implications be the fact that we need a stronger arts sector in order to have the arts in the health sector? So I mean that to improve such things as professional arts education, employment conditions of artists and different support systems for artists, this would help the arts become more strongly in the health sector. And this is for Daisy Fangood, this question.
I think Daisy was very quick to jump for the microphone, but I might also want to ask Anna that to comment on that question as well, perhaps.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with what you say. I think the thing that always amazes and overwhelms me is how much, I guess speaking from a UK context, how much our arts sector manages to do with the funding that it has. I think it's absolutely phenomenal, the range of activities and the breadth and the sheer number that we have going on. But like you, I think I share a concern here around the investment in arts and cultural sectors. And I think my concern is that whenever there are times of austerity or funding problems, it seems like one of the first things to get cut is the arts and cultural sector. And I think that's because people think, well, it's non-essential, therefore let's cut it. And I think it often feels like saving €500 million or pounds in the arts is a quick saving. Whereas as a researcher, what I keep coming back to, even though we don't have the full evidence on this, what I keep coming back to is that saving €500 million or pounds or whatever, they're about the same at the moment, aren't they? Saving €500 million on the arts, I think, is ending up costing much more than that downstream for the health sector, because we then have lower levels of social cohesion, we have higher rates of mental illness, we have lower support available for individuals. So what I'd like us to get to is a point where funding for the arts and cultural sectors is somehow protected or ring-fenced and valued much better, so that we're actually investing more in this, making sure we're not just relying on the goodwill of artists to provide these activities for free or without enough funding, but we have a properly resourced sector that can genuinely meet the need that we have for it from a health perspective.
Anna, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, we meet that issue every year when we are working with the budgets. Some parties want us to cut the culture budgets, and some of us don't. And we are arguing about that. But you have to realize you can never find a finance for healthcare or for the welfare state by taking the money for the culture sector. Then you won't have so much healthcare because it's so little money in that sector. So that's not the way to do it. You have to invent completely new things, a new way to provide healthcare, for example. But I think that we can learn from the Norwegians, because they have this national center for culture and health. And I think that would be a good thing to have in many more countries, such as Sweden. We don't have it in Sweden. We have a regional one in Stockholm. But I think that we need to highlight these issues on a national level as well. And maybe we should talk about the education for the healthcare professions as well, because if we start with the education on the ground level to start with the showing how important culture and art is in the healthcare system, then we probably in the future will have an easier task to manage to improve the use of culture in the healthcare.
I also seem to have, I'm trying to find this now, but I couldn't. I have this memory of reading about Norway as an example during the kind of Great Recession where in the majority of European countries investment in culture went back significantly. And Norway actually boosted its investment in culture significantly. I don't know if you recall that moment, but I think
I guess you're spending all the oil.
No, but this is important. I think I could take an example from our university where we have the Faculty of Health and Nursing and the Faculty of Medicine and the Faculty of Teaching and Education where the arts is. And now actually the musician on the Faculty of Teaching and Education have a practice on the nursing homes. And we start to collaborate with financing studies together with them. And actually the initiative is coming from the arts. So I think this it's important and crucial to get money, because if you're going to the health sector and try to get funding, you don't get it. Yeah.
I think there's also frequently a conversation a kind of conversation about the bottom rung. I mean, I think neither the arts sector nor the health sector probably think of themselves as sectors that are sufficiently funded. So there's a kind of negative competition, as it were. Is there, yes, question in the back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Petra Malin. I'm a PhD candidate here in Helsinki University, candidate in social work. My question is about social change and how that's related to arts and health discussion. I think many of the initiatives that I'm studying have focus also on issues like social justice and injustice, and maybe some of the major issues that people who participate think about are not just issues about their individual lives or even just the community, but also about the society in general, and how the need for focus of change is not only on the individual but also on the society. And recently Daisy said there that Arts for Health or like that, this kind of initiatives, I understood that you said that they're apolitical, and I kind of like some of the initiatives that I think that I've been looking into are like striving for social change, and maybe then I don't know if you can call them completely apolitical. So I guess I'm asking like where do you see social change in arts and health?
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you that the social change aspect of the arts is really crucial, and we bring that out in the report as well, in terms of, for example, the arts being a way to try and help in times of conflict as a mediating factor. I think when I say that I'd like them to be apolitical, what I mean is not trying to dampen down the effects that the arts can have in social change, but rather I mean that I would like to feel that no matter which government was in power, investment would be made into arts and health, and there would be policies and strategies to enable that work. I'd like to think this isn't a question where one political party will see its value, whereas another will think it's not worthwhile. I want to get to the stage, ideally in the future, where it doesn't feel like each time there's an election in a different country, there's the risk that this topic is going to get cut or thrown away or not valued in the same way.
Any other questions? I think we've got a question in the front.
Yes, hi, my name is Kaile Hikonen. I'm director of Sereda Research Center here at University of the Arts Helsinki. Considering the research needs that Daisy took up in her presentation and later here, and considering the resources that we have, and considering the fact that research is done in a number of countries in the Nordic region and in the UK, what would be the rational next steps for research to strengthen the collaboration and to advance the field of arts and health?
Well, I think one thing that's really important is that we keep pushing research from lots of different perspectives. So we don't start to say that any one type of research design or methodology is more important than the other. So I think that's the first thing I would say. But something we did highlight in the report is some of the areas where we feel there should still be specific investment in terms of resources and the time of researchers. One of these was around implementation research, which I've already mentioned, so we can actually look at how you embed these programs. Another is around the population level research, and I mentioned that that's been driven so far, particularly from Nordic countries and from the UK, but I think we need a lot more of this population research because this gives us a chance to look at the long-term impact, and I mean over decades, not just over months, weeks or months, and also allows us to look at a nationally representative samples at this population level. I think we definitely need much more health economic research. I think we need a particular investment on prevention research, so looking at how the arts are helping to prevent the use, prevent the development of health conditions and help to reduce the usage of health services. And there are particular biological mechanisms that we mentioned that we know are under-researched. And this is important because particularly when we take a clinical angle, understanding those biological mechanisms is key to understanding how these arts interventions can be used for particular clinical conditions. But that is just a selection. I know there are many, many more, and probably each researcher you speak to will have a different opinion. But these were some where we identified particular gaps from the evidence base that we believe could support practice and policy moving forwards.
Maybe we can use this as an effective kind of quick question to all of you to see if there are any aspects that you think arts and health research should really focus on in the next few years, or I mean, particular interests that you might have. I mean, yeah.
No, I very agree. Important, and the implementation is important, and the population-based studies to get more about the whole population. I think it's crucial to get more evidence about that.
Yeah. Is there anybody else who wants to come in on this? I don't want to force the question on anyone.
I totally agree what was already said by the other panelists. So I think the population-based approach, it's very important to have that kind of data more, and also implementation, and also the economic aspects. But these are such, this all are really needed, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things, two things that I might just say from our perspective. One is one aspect of art, as it were, that we didn't focus on is architecture. Architecture, particularly in countries like Denmark, it's an interesting phenomenon because Denmark, being a kind of leading proponent of design and kind of integrated design, they have put a lot of thought into how they design their hospitals, how they design their healthcare services, and how they make that work in a healthcare environment. But they don't think of it as art and health. And there's definitely something that we can still do in terms of repositioning that conversation and saying to those practitioners to say, what you are doing is very much art and health. What you're doing very much belongs into this area of that we're interested in. And I think that's perhaps something that we might want to focus separately on in a smaller report. Yeah. Are there any other questions from the field? Anybody who wants to? We're not gonna. Oh, there's one question in the back there.
I'm Pilvi Kuitu, Managing Director of a cultural center, and we've been doing this for like 15 years in practice, in regional and national level. And I was wondering about the value base, or that the report gives like good insight of the effects, but should we have like united value base first? Because somebody was talking about how can cultural field and health and social field work together. They have to know the stake, why they would like to do, what is the winning situation for them. But should we still go a bit further or upper, that we would know the value base, why we are doing together? This is what we found out. We've been working quite a lot with social and health sector actors, and we always came up with good results when we had verbalized our value base that we share. And when we haven't, we usually fail, or we have lots of problems because we are aiming for the inhabitants or the customers walk faster or be in a better mood. So that kind of the surface. But if we don't know what we are actually doing, we're kind of humanity and equality and like happy diversity. So we are struggling.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of the work that arts and health kind of comes from, a lot of the reasons I think for its existence is exactly because of that values base of health equity, of human values, human rights. I don't know. Has that been something, Daisy, in your experience that you've capitalized on? You know, the kind of inherent values base of arts and health.
I think one of the things in my own research that we've tried to do is not to draw in any previous values base, but to approach this as objectively as we possibly could. So particularly the epidemiology work that my team have been leading at the moment, we've been working with cohort studies where other people designed the cohort studies, other people chose what questions went in, and nobody who answered those questions thought that their questions on arts were going to be linked in with their questions on health in any way. So that's really helped, because it means that I felt like we've been able to take less of a value-driven approach in terms of then using these data to explore questions. But then again, I also think that sometimes the values that are attached to the arts are important in terms of people's engagement with them and the enjoyment that they derive from it. And for certain arts interventions, that's really crucial to the overall effect of those activities on people. So I wouldn't want to imply that they aren't important. I think I just want to imply that in research, we try and be objective as possible. And that's another reason I particularly like using biological markers as well, is because I guess whenever we're running clinical trials, let's say, and we're asking people about their symptoms before and after engagement in a project, there's always a risk that they're going to give you a slightly more positive picture because they know that the intervention was being delivered to help their mental health. Whereas if alongside people reporting decreases in stress and depression, we're also seeing decreases in biological stress hormones and inflammatory markers associated with depression, then that combined picture gives us more of a rigorous and robust indication that these activities are helping. So I think it's possible for us to do research in a way where we can take a step back from those values too.
Although not to detract from that at all, I think it's a hugely important step to be taking, to be kind of making the results more objectively relevant. But if we think, I mean, it is curious, it is interesting that in the Nordic region there is such an uptake of this. There's such a natural gravitation towards arts and health. And maybe as a final question then. Just before we begin to wrap up, Annika, do you feel like you can comment on that? Why is it something that has kind of popped up again and again within the Nordic Council? Of ministers, sorry.
Nordic Council is something else.
Yes.
Well, maybe it's because the connection is recognized broadly within the Nordic region. I'm obviously talking about that. And there has been some work done in the field, and yes, we can see that it's important, and we should do more. I can't really give another answer to that. I mean, yes, we just we can see that there is an interest, and we really hope.
And perhaps the understanding of its effectiveness, there's just been an earlier recognition of it that's underlined the kind of interest in the field.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in the regional level, in the local level.
Yeah.
And we are certainly going to take this report to our senior officials for the next meeting.
That's good that's very good to hear. And maybe that's an opportunity to say for each of us to kind of say one last thing about kind of what next type of scenario. What would you like to see happen next, perhaps in your own sphere of influence, or what would you like to see WHO do next? I think that's also an important question. If you have any thoughts, again, Annika, maybe we start with you and we make the round back to me.
Yes, just promote this report. I mean, talk to the governments, to the different departments, ministries. Stress the importance of it, so it's not only us doing it. And yeah, maybe Finland will take it into the presidency program 2021. Who knows?
Thank you.
So.
I think the keywords are implementation. We have now data, we have evidence, and we have experiences. We should have these broader implemented nationally, but also internationally, I think so. And have a multi-sectoral approach where very well used. And thinking about how to support the process, I think also WHO could do a lot to have create opportunities for member states and experts to share their experiences, to learn from each other's. So I think that's something which is for you asked earlier about how to have all the countries in Europe on board, and that's something where we need some regional support for countries.
Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I think this report is very important. So keep up that good work, and let's talk more about it, because we haven't had a time to read it yet. So we have to come back, I guess. And I'm sure you can do more reports. I think that the architecture that you mentioned is a very important area to talk about more. Next step, what should we do? Well, this is very inspiring, I think, and we want to do a lot. But just to mention one thing, I think that to use the innovation, the interest of innovation to also promote culture and arts in healthcare. I think of, for example, the virtual reality glasses. We are using them now in a small scale. I think we can do a lot more to provide good experience for patient in healthcare. Right now, we're working with elder people, but also with the children in the children's hospital.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lesson we learned in Norway is continuity, just to keep up. And it's also important that the autonomy in the culture is protected. And that the healthcare, now the health effect can be demonstrated in a documentable and systematic framework, the evidence.
Thank you.
Well, as a researcher with my team, we're leading lots more studies at the moment, particularly looking at implementation and epidemiology and biological mechanisms. But I'm also delighted that we're continuing to work with Niels and his team, and we have our forthcoming Panorama special edition on arts and health, which will be released next year as well. So hopefully this is just the start of many more activities that we can deliver to support this work.
Thank you very much, Daisy. You took the words out of my mouth. From our perspective, this is definitely an area of huge interest for ourselves and something that we want to continue pushing both within the European region and globally. We have a public health panorama issue coming out in March on this topic. We're also in the process of producing several films, short films on this topic, one of which we'll see at the end here. And we're very keen to hear from you and to collaborate with anybody who thinks that they might have something to add to this process on the policy level. So please do get in touch. For now, though, I'd like to say thank you very much to all of our panelists. It's been a tremendously interesting conversation. I hope we can continue it again, maybe even meet up one more time at some point to discuss the details or perhaps the next report. But for now, please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you very much. So I'll ask you to take your seats again. We're going to show a film in 1 second. If you don't mind just staying seated for a few more minutes. Before we show this final clip, I also wanted to say a few words of thank you, because it's been a long road to come here, and I think it's been hugely enjoyable, but we've had an enormous amount of help in doing so. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank our hosts, of course, the Ministry of Education and Culture of Finland, the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health of Finland, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, the Taikusidan Arts and Health Coordination Center, Turku University of Applied Sciences, the Arts Promotion Center in Finland, Arts Equal at the University of Arts Helsinki, and the Kulta Central Organization for Finnish Culture and Arts Associations. I also wanted to say many thanks to our colleagues at WHO who have helped produce the report. I wanted to just say thank you to the authors, both Daisy and of course Saoirse Finn as well, who helped Daisy with putting it together. I wanted to say thank you very much to the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust has been a generous supporter of cultural context of health and well-being, and without their support, a lot of the work that we're doing wouldn't have been possible. But most of all, I think I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for coming. And I want to thank everybody who's involved in this topic, everybody who does research on it, everybody who's a practitioner, everybody who's shared their story today and who continues to do so. And on that note, we have a final film, somebody who's going to share their story with us. It's a young lady called Silje, who's Norwegian, and for whom art has had a profound impact on her life. Perhaps we can see that film.
Jeg heter Silje Marie Ros, og jeg har PTSD, DID og schizofreni. Og schizofreni er at du føler, ser ting og hører ting som egentlig ikke er der. Det er ikke så enkelt å leve med det, men schizofreni har jeg levd med egentlig så lenge jeg kan huske. Jeg hører ting egentlig ganske ofte. Jeg hører jo folk banke på dører og sånn. Og så går jeg til døra, så er det ingen der, så blir jeg så nervøs for om de må komme inn, eller jeg blir så nervøs for. Jeg snakket med en psykolog som sa at kunst kan hjelpe mot all angst og all sånn stemmer og sånn. Det kan få deg til å føle deg bedre. Kunsten min, da, det er en ganske stor del av det jeg ser og hører av de stemmene. Det blir på en måte en karakter som jeg maler. Det blir som at jeg har et bilde på de stemmene jeg hører. Jeg ser en liten jente som er rundt 8-9. Hun bestemmer seg ikke hvor gammel hun er, men hun er rundt her. Hun ser egentlig sånn ut. Både med blodårer i ansiktet og svart hår og tomt, eller sint blikk, eller hva jeg skal si. Jeg ville anbefalt for alle å begynne med kunst, fordi kunst er en måte du kan frigjøre all den angsten man har. Kunst og maling har hjulpet meg til at familie og venner kan bli bedre kjent med meg, at de skjønner litt mer hva jeg går gjennom. For det er egentlig den eneste måten jeg kan uttrykke meg selv, som jeg vet om.
Det så for verdensberømt, dette er skrik da.
Jeg tror mest maleriet handler om angst for de to som står bak det.
Ja, det virker ut som det. Det løpet fra dem to der som har gjort henne nå kanskje på en eller annen måte. Det det du tenker?
Ja. Det er liksom ingen regler for kunst. Du kan lage hva du vil. Kunst har gitt meg et språk og har gjort meg veldig selvstendig i forhold til det jeg var før. Og kunst har gitt meg veldig mye glede i livet.
Thank you, Nils. Thank you all. Now we have time to have a shared buffet lunch. So please come to eat with us and join discussions there.